They weren't just teammates. They were two storm systems colliding in one quarterback room. One mastered silence under pressure. The other turned broken plays into breakaway runs. Together, they dragged the San Francisco 49ers from greatness into something even harder to reach: sustained dominance. This is how Joe Montana and Steve Young turned competition into a weapon and reshaped the NFL in the process. Before the banners, San Francisco was a rebuild. The franchise needed more than talent. It needed a plan. Bill Walsh walked in with a new way to play football: rhythm throws, timing windows, decisions made before the snap. He called it a system. Defenses called it misery. To execute it, Walsh didn't chase a cannon arm. He chose a problem solver. Joe Montana arrived quiet and unassuming. No thunder, no chest beating. He read the field like a chess player, moved safeties with his eyes, and never let the clock speed him up. Then came the moment everyone remembers, even if they weren't born yet. Montana rolled right, kept his eyes level, and lofted a pass that kissed the top of the sky. Dwight Clark rose and pulled it down with fingertips that became California folklore. One play turned a theory into a tradition. San Francisco wasn't a project anymore. It was a standard. The first title followed, and with it a new identity: precision over panic. Small gains that became big ones. A quarterback who treated chaos like a puzzle he was built to solve. The Dynasty had its opening act. But that wasn't the whole story. Greatness rarely travels in a straight line. A strike-shortened season bent momentum out of shape. A playoff heartbreak stung. The question started: was the magic a one-year flash, or the start of something permanent? Montana answered by turning the offense into a clinic. Short throws turned into long runs. Third downs became math problems he already solved in the huddle. In the biggest games, his pulse never budged. Another Super Bowl arrived with the quiet inevitability of a tide. The 49ers weren't winning with luck. They were winning with clarity. But football has a brutal honesty to it. Bodies take hits, windows close. By the mid-'80s, the 49ers were still dangerous, but the air felt thinner. Montana's back became a story. The offense needed insurance. Walsh, always 3 steps ahead, started searching. He didn't just want a backup. He wanted the right air. And that's when a left-handed problem for the rest of the league stepped into view. Steve Young was a highlight reel trapped in the wrong situation. At BYU, he threw with rhythm and ran like a tailback. In Tampa Bay, he ran for his life. The talent was obvious. The context wasn't friendly. Walsh looked past the noise. He saw accuracy on the move, a quick trigger, and competitive stubbornness that felt familiar in a different body. San Francisco traded for Young and called it contingency. It sounded polite. It wasn't. There were now 2 alphas in the room and only one huddle to command. Montana had rings and the loyalty of a locker room. Young had tools and time on his side. Pressure doesn't always come from across the line of scrimmage. Sometimes it sits one chair away in the meeting room. The strike year poured fuel on the situation. Montana kept producing. Young flashed in short bursts. The team suffered a playoff shock that winter. And the whispers hardened into headlines. Is this still Joe's team forever, or is there an expiration date everyone is pretending not to see? The fuse was lit. The next season turned into a laboratory. Walsh rotated quarterbacks. One series Joe, the next Steve. It felt wrong to everyone and necessary to the head coach trying to peer into the future. The record wobbled. The questions grew louder. Then Montana did what he always did when the noise peaked. He turned the volume down by winning. San Francisco clawed into January and started cutting through the bracket. There was revenge on the team that had embarrassed them. There was a freezer-burned victory in Chicago that looked like mind over climate. And then there was a final drive on the biggest stage that felt inevitable from the first step. Montana worked the field, hit his spots, and walked off with another title like it was a chore he'd scheduled for the afternoon. Young celebrated like everyone else, but it didn't quiet the tension. Winning masked the conflict. It didn't resolve it. Everyone knew the calendar keeps perfect time. The question wasn't whether Joe could still do it. It was how much longer he'd be allowed to do it with another franchise quarterback in the room waiting for his turn. What came next was Joe Montana's last summit, and one of the cleanest quarterback seasons anyone had seen. The 49ers became a weekly demonstration of how to break a defense without hurrying. Wide margins, calm endings, another Super Bowl that turned into a televised clinic. The chase for a three-peat followed. It felt possible. It felt deserved. Then a late fumble swung a conference title game, and a kicker ended the dream with a ball that barely left the ground before it broke a building's heart. Moments like that don't just take a season. They leave a mark. Then came the injury that changed everything. An elbow, a tendon, a long, cold rehab. The franchise had to make a choice it had avoided for years. Young finally had the huddle without an asterisk. Change wasn't looming anymore. It was happening. If taking over for a legend were only about talent, the story would be short. Young had more than enough. Quick eyes, quick feet, ball out on time. But the job wasn't just to move the chains, it was to outpace memory. Every big throw came with a silent comparison. Every mistake echoed louder because it bounced off 4 Lombardi trophies. Fans asked the question out loud. Media asked it in 50 variations. Can you be as clutch as Joe? Can you win when the season is down to 1 drive and a heartbeat? Can you carry this city through January without the guy who taught it to believe this was normal? Young answered with numbers that looked like they belonged in a video game. Efficiency crested. Touchdowns piled up. The offense ran downhill. There was just one wall they kept hitting. A young dynasty in Dallas with speed everywhere and a nasty habit of ending San Francisco winters early. The comparison with Montana sharpened because Joe, now wearing a different uniform, found playoff life again. It wasn't fair to Steve. It was real anyway. The only answer that would end it was a ring. The front office made sure Young had a roster that could smother a game. Veterans arrived to harden the defense. Playmakers stacked on the edges. The offense kept its timing. The defense took the ball away. Early stumbles sparked a sideline eruption from Young that read like a promise. From that point, the team felt less like a contender and more like a schedule problem for everyone else. Then came the postseason, where legacies get written in ink. San Francisco knocked out its main rival with a fast start that felt like payback for 2 winters of frustration. And 2 weeks later, Steve Young walked into the Super Bowl and turned it into proof. He kept firing. Touchdowns kept piling up, 6 by the end. That number meant history and therapy at the same time. It wasn't a quiet win. It was a statement. Not just I can win, but I can win like this. The monkey everyone talked about climbed down. The shadow everyone mentioned finally stepped back. No dynasty gets the privilege of a single rival. After Dallas, another problem appeared in green and gold with a quarterback who played like a river running downhill. The Packers kept showing up in January as if they had a key to the stadium. San Francisco traded blows, won classics, lost heartbreakers, and lived the thin line that separates good teams from champions. There were flashes that looked like fate was ready to help again. A desperate throw threaded through defenders, a receiver clutching the ball as if he'd borrowed strength from the original catch and paid it back with interest. But the ride didn't end with confetti that time. It ended the way football often does, with injuries that force hard conversations. Steve Young took another violent shot. The tally of concussions stopped sounding like a stat and started sounding like a plea. He stepped away with a ring, an MVP legacy, and the respect of anyone who understands how hard it is to follow a ghost and still play free. The dynasty's lights dimmed, not because the ideas stopped working, but because eras end when time says so. What remained was a blueprint that coaches still study, and a rivalry that players still use as a measuring stick for competitive fire that never turns toxic. You can compare the resumes forever. 4 rings for Joe with San Francisco, 1 for Steve as the guy. Regular season MVPs on both sides, records rewritten, legends minted. But the scoreboard isn't the point here. The point is what happened in those meeting rooms and on those practice fields. A legend refused to fade. A successor refused to be a footnote. They shared a playbook and refused to share the throne. That tension could have fractured a locker room. Instead, it forged habits that outlasted both of them. Precision in the details, brutal honesty and self-evaluation. A standard that doesn't blink when someone new walks in with a different skill set. Montana taught a franchise that poise is a weapon. He could slow a GI. It's easy to romanticize rivalries, to pretend everyone secretly loved the process. They didn't. It was awkward. It was loud. It was personal. There were sideline glares and press conference answers that said less than the eyes said. And yet the work kept getting done. Meetings started on time. Reads were drilled until they turned into reflexes. The next man up had to be better than the version of himself from last week because the guy beside him was chasing the same improvement. That's the part worth remembering. The dynasty wasn't built on slogans. It was built on Tuesday afternoons when one Hall of Famer tried to win a rep against another and then did it again and again. Iron sharpens iron isn't a poster on a wall. It's a competition that takes stamina. It leaves bruises and raises trophies. It also leaves stories that never sit still, because every generation rereads them and finds a new lesson. Joe Montana and Steve Young were not opposites. They were variations of the same relentless idea: solve the game better than everyone else. One did it with stillness. One did it with speed. The 49ers didn't survive their quarterback controversy. They turned it into an advantage. That is the real legacy. Not just the rings, not just the records, but the proof that a franchise can live through tension, harness it, and walk away stronger. If you're looking for the cleanest line through this history, it's simple and stubborn. First, a precise assassin who made chaos feel quiet. Then, a left-handed storm who made the same offense feel brand new. The torch wasn't handed over, it was wrestled away. And because of that, San Francisco didn't just win, it learned how to keep winning. That's the story. 2 quarterbacks, 1 standard. A dynasty that refused to choose between past and future, so it became both.